I had this profound sense of, this is what people mean when they say the journey is the important bit, right? Because the summit is a summit, and that's great, but then it was gone. And as soon as I turned and started going down the mountain, I had this real sense of, the journey was the thing. And it sounds a bit trite to say it, but who you become in the pursuit of the goal. Maybe it's an age-related thing as well, or maybe it's achieving a massive goal that, when the odds are stacked against you. But I definitely had this sense of it wasn't just the summit, it was everything that came in the build-up to it.
Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Kiekefer. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us.
Welcome back, episode 58 of the Duffel Shuffle podcast. Adrian, you're in a van somewhere. What's up?
How's it going, Sam? I'm in my happy place. I mean, I have a lot of happy places. I probably say that when I'm in Vegas,
a
when
tent,
I'm in my cabin in Tahoe, when I'm in Nepal, when I'm flying. But a van on the east side of the Sierra in summer, like with my family, rock climbing and trail running and trying to get in some high Sierra big routes. Like, I mean, there's so many things that kept me in California, but like this one is a really big part of it. Like I started visiting the high Sierra probably in the 90s, right after college. And like just trying to put some of the most basic classic routes together and kind of falling in love with this place. And it's where Em and I built so much of our relationship, was on big routes and climbing trips down here in our old Tacoma. And now we get to be back down here for a couple of weeks. And, just the remarkable, I think, elevation change is possible here, where we can be in the desert at hot springs and 20 minutes later be over 10,000 feet on some of the best like granite that exists on this planet, and the entire east side of the mountain range, despite how many people live in California? A lot. Do you know?
A lot.
Like the Eastern Sierra is empty. And I know the old timers will be like, it's so busy as compared to how it was in the 90s. And it's like, sure, but it's empty. Like we had a world-class crag to ourselves in perfect conditions yesterday afternoon in Rock Creek. The only group out there climbing some of the best, 200-foot sport and trad routes you could imagine on Immaculate Stone. We're camping right at the base of it with a babbling brook running by. Like we don't have to drive. Like every summer I go all these different places, and then, we came here and we're like, oh, yeah, we live in the best place on the planet.
It's pretty incredible. And, what I like about the east side is it's such a what I like about the Sierra and the east side of the Sierra gives you incredible access, but it's such a long range. And so, we're talking hundreds of miles of range. And therefore, we were talking about the weather a little bit before we hopped on. We've got this little cool spell, and the east side of the Sierra gives you the ability to go south and low elevation and get warm, or stay high and north and stay high elevation and stay north and, manage temperatures. And so you almost you have this dial that you can dial in either direction to manage so many factors. And like you said, there's just incredible, world-class options for climbing and skiing and trail running and mountain biking and all the activities we love. And it's right there, and no one else is there.
That's it. And yeah, this is a really fun fam trip for us. Me, Emily, and Arrow, almost getting closer to 4 than 3 now. And he's still in his little cubby in our forged van that's made for families. It's still working. And he's leaning in a lot more to the activities and the wildness of just being outside in the woods. We're also finding out that he has like my mom's reaction to mosquitoes. This boy is just covered in huge welts. So, just it's important to keep it real, right? Like, of course, like there's challenges to every place. And our current challenges are mosquitoes love Arrow, and Arrow doesn't love pooping in pit toilets, which the campground has. So we're still figuring that out.
There we go.
How about you,
The
Sam?
real life.
What's going on in Tahoe?
We got a little weather shift. It's cooling down. It's a little windy and some precip coming in. So one of these little spurts of weather, but life is good.
Is it gonna snow?
I mean, I doubt it. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote that it's going to snow, and everyone's like, it's going to snow, and like, yeah, maybe we get a little bit of a flurry in the middle of the night tonight, but we're not talking about like accumulation by any means.
And we might break cold temperature records, I heard, in both Reno and maybe some spots in California.
Sure. For an hour, we might dip into a record.
Sam is not impressed. It takes a lot to impress you, Sam.
I mean, it's like, these are just like headlines, right?
Yeah,
it's the weather. The weather is volatile. We all know that. It's getting more volatile with global weirding. And it's, when we get a record by half a degree, like, cool.
Cool. 100%. That is a great perspective that I really appreciate. It's weather.
I think, it's funny, like in the winter, we spend so much time focusing on the weather, and, the weather is such a part of like my morning and evening routine all winter long. And in the summer, I love to just shut my brain off to the weather. I'm like, what's the weather? Well, I'll see when I wake up and look out the window. Like, I'm going to base my activities off that. It's like really nice to just kind of disconnect from that a little bit.
Yeah, that is not our world. When you are married to a high-end rock climber, they're like nerding out on weather just as much in the summer as in the winter. And like, all the climbers have like humidity meters now that they bring out to the crag. And so it's nerdier and nerdier, but it does make a lot of sense. Again, we were talking about this so much variety here in the East Side, and Tahoe is true for this as well. And it's like, so it does actually make sense to really lean into understanding the weather to figure out the combination of wind direction, temperature, and moisture for what elevation and what aspect and what time of day to climb. In some ways, I think more about the weather in the summer for rock climbing than for skiing, with the exception that obviously with skiing, there's like probably a greater kind of risk component that it kind of focuses my energy a bit more in the winter than the summer. In the summer, risk-wise, we're basically only thinking about thunderstorms. And of course, here in California, we're kind of luckily blessed as compared to Colorado or Wyoming or Utah that we're not as monsoonal. We don't deal with the thunderstorms as much.
10 days of summer, that's what I always say.
10 days of summer. You're saying that, 10 days of summer, we get thunderstorms.
We get thunderstorms in Tahoe. A little more on the east side.
It's a little more on the east side, but still, how rare is it to like pack a Gore-Tex shell when you're in the east side? It almost never happens.
Exactly. All right. Well, it was a tough week, and I know you wanted to talk about it, so we'll dive in a little bit to the news.
Yeah, tough pivot, but I guess this is part of why I think what we try to capture on this podcast, that, the mountains give us so much and so much joy, and we can never lose leaning into that joy. And like, I had an amazing day yesterday in the mountains, while at the same time, like, owning and living the fact that it is really dangerous to play at a high level in the mountains. And that means that we consistently lose friends and peers. And now, especially with social media and news, the way it travels, just everyone's inundated almost every day about accidents. Unfortunately, this one hits close to home, as many people listening probably know. A few days ago in Pakistan, Guillaume Perel, whose nickname is G, French IFMGA mountain guide and really prolific ski mountaineer, We actually had him on the podcast here. I think it was episode 40 with his partner, Christina Lustenberger. G was killed in an avalanche in Pakistan, trying to ski. They were over there, we believe, to ski a peak called K6 that had not been skied before. My understanding is, and this is a very news is still coming out. There's still rescue efforts to get G's body down, as well as make sure we know his two partners, Christina and Boris Langenstein, also from France. They're both okay. But there's a lot still going on in real time in the mountains in Pakistan, and they were obviously deep and far away from both rescue resources and communications. But we do know G was killed. We do know he was swept away in an avalanche. We don't know exactly the nature of that avalanche yet. We do know Boris and Lusty are okay. And, for me, the reason we had these guys on the podcast, other than being really close to Lusty and being so excited she had found such a great both life partner and play partner to go rage with, is that raging. They, over the past couple of years, have been just putting down some remarkable lines on faces and mountains that ski mountaineers have been attempting to ski in good style for decades. Peaks like Mount Robeson in Canada and Mount Cook in New Zealand. And they've just been ticking off these huge lines and doing it with big smiles on their faces, with film crews to capture some of it. It has been so exciting to watch, and part of what I love talking about on this podcast, and I know you do too, it just feels like we're having another golden age, especially of high-end skiing in the big mountains. And the fact that these guys were taking those skills together, like Boris, I think last year skied the Rupel face of Nanga Parbat, another just incredible line. This crew is going out and just showing everyone what's possible, and it just fucking sucks to see one gone. I think G was 42 years old, lived in Chamonix, even though he was from a different region in France, and just had the love and respect of so many across skiing, climbing, paragliding, and the mountain guide community. It's he will be sorely missed, and sending love to Lusty and Boris and everyone who loved G.
Yeah, no doubt. Super sad one, sad week. I think what I really liked about G on the podcast was he was just infectiously enthusiastic. He just he seemed happy. And that was, I think, you talk to people these days and life is busy, life is crazy, the world is a crazy place. And when you have someone find a passion that they're just so in love with, that, you can feel the smile on their face when they start talking about it. He stood out for sure when we had him on the podcast. And I think it's important to remember that, these incredible things are being done in the mountains, and with that comes, risk. And I think as lines of, new routes, climbing routes, and new ski descents are being established, the level of risk has to slowly get increased slightly, because there's just fewer options left for first ascents. And, while, these athletes are doing their best to manage that risk and make smart decisions, there is still a very high level of risk in these endeavors, and a tragic loss for the ski mountaineering community. But certainly he made his mark before he went.
Absolutely. And, something Tommy said a couple of weeks in an interview, Tommy Caldwell said a couple of weeks ago to us in an interview that that we'll have on the podcast soon, really has resonated. And I've been talking a lot about to friends who do what we do. And it was this idea that, Tommy kind of realizing when he was skiing with Cody in the Sierra that he was actually free soloing a lot. And, he might have only been free soloing 5'9", 5'10", but sometimes it felt like maybe it was 5'11". And that's just a normal day in the life of a ski mountaineer. And then, of course, when skiers like G and Boris and Lusty are pushing that level to, I think we all can appreciate like what Honnold did in free solo is so clear and so easy to understand the risk of it. And I think ski mountaineering, because it's just so built into the sport and because everyone solos when they're skiing. And so everyone kind of, even when you're at KT, you could choose lines where you're essentially to have real exposure and no ropes and completely dependent on your ski ability. Since skiers build into that, it's just baked in. I think maybe we don't recognize sometimes what people from the outside and especially rock climbers see so clearly is the really high risk world that ski mountaineering is. Very different from most forms of rock climbing or even alpine climbing. And that's not to say we shouldn't do it. It's obviously been my greatest passion and the thing I've chased for 25 years. But with age and with loss and with conversations like this, I think I'm at least realizing that we should be talking about that kind of like heightened level of risk within ski mountaineering that is very real and is part of what makes the sport perhaps so incredible and powerful, and the partnerships and bonds so strong out of those sports. And also there's a lot of loss in the ski world every year. So
absolutely. Well, that kind of leads me into my news story because it's a little happier.
Bring us back up. Bring us up, Sam.
Some friends of mine were up in the Alaska range and they made a first descent on Foraker. And it's kind of a cool story. So some friends of mine, Morgan McGlashan, Brian Berger, Gavin Hess, and their friend Aidan Whitelaw climbed the Sultana Ridge on Foraker. And what's cool about this is they had some other friends out there, Sam Hennessy and Ryan Griffiths, who were climbing a second ascent of the South Face on Foraker as well. And they all linked up near the summit. And they had, and that was kind of like, I think they knew it could happen, but it wasn't necessarily like the goal. They're climbing like two different sides of a very big mountain.
Cool.
But they linked up near the summit. They communicated via satellite communications, and the six of them made a first descent of the Northwest Ridge via the 1934 Houston route. They all had this amazing first descent. So 4 people climbed up one side, 2 people climbed up the other, and all 6 of them made a first descent on Foraker.
Ski descent?
First ski descent, yes. First ski descent. And this was dubbed a snowslider's dream by all 6 of their mutual friend, Michael Gardner, who lost his life in the mountains a year and a half ago or so. And so he'd kind of spotted this line and thought it would be a great one. And so the 6 of them together got to make this first descent. It sounds like it was like a 75-hour round trip effort with a midline bivvy and just an awesome adventure in the Alaska range. And I think, it was inspiring because we hear about people, there's so much climbing and skiing going on in the Alaska range. You'd think that everything by now has been climbed or skied. And just seeing that these first ascents or second ascents or whatever the accomplishment is still happening on an annual basis is really cool. And it highlights, one, that creativity can still be found in the mountains, and 2, there are endless numbers of lines that are very proud objectives. And if you have that creativity and you have that, inspiration behind you, there's a lot still to be done. So shout out to that group of 6 for a first ascent on Foraker, and pretty cool to see some friends get, posted about all over Instagram. These are friends that I've met along my track as a guide. A lot of them are guides themselves, and they had an amazing adventure, it sounds like.
Oh, that's so rad. I hope there's some video or more stories to come of the line and what it looked like, and hopefully some of the great skiing. It's a great point. It's easy, I think, for us on this podcast to talk about like the things that percolate up in news are often tragedies, and we obviously spend some time talking about those. And my little like just speech about how dangerous ski mountaineering is, but the reality is the the vast, vast majority of people going out ski mountaineering are doing it with a high degree of safety and, staying on the right side of luck and having really cool experiences. So I love, hearing this story about that crew, that like those things are happening all over the mountains, in the Alps, in the Himalaya, of course, in Alaska. Every season, so many new lines are being done safely, and people are having these experiences that they build their lives around, and that is still the norm, and the accidents are still the exception. And I think it's important we never lose sight of that. So rad! Congrats to the team.
Absolutely. Well, coming up, we had a really interesting conversation. Our guest on this episode is Garth Miller. Garth is from the UK, and he was one of the 4 climbers that in 2025 climbed Everest from London to London in under 7 days. So they flew from London to Kathmandu, made their way to base camp, climbed to the top of Everest and back, and then made it all the way back to the UK in under 7 days. And the kind of headline that really captured everyone's attention was that they used Xenon Gas to support their climb. And this is a new technique that hadn't been really tried before at the highest altitudes around the world. There's other use cases for Xenon, and we've talked a lot about it. We talked a lot about it last Everest season. It's popped up, it's percolated into the news multiple times since then, and this was the first instance that we actually got to talk to someone who was part of the team, use Xenon, and successfully summited Everest. So really great conversation. I really enjoyed Garth. He had an honest and really unique perspective on the use of Xenon. And while he's certainly an advocate of it, he acknowledged a lot of the things that we've been talking about and discussing and that are unknown around Xenon. So really awesome conversation. Adrian, what did you think of talking to Garth?
Yeah, this is one I'm really excited to put out in the world. Like, I think Xenon use and everything else that went along with that very high speed trip, like really high flow oxygen and things like that. And of course, fantastic logistics as well. Like some things that Alpenglow is really proud of and has really pioneered over the past 15, 20 years, being taken to, I guess, a logical extension, which is this, under 1 week climb. And you and I have a lot of preconceived ideas about especially how Xenon kind of came into use and whether it had been tested appropriately and whether it's actually doing anything. So one of the things we want to do on this podcast is not only have our opinions and thoughts, but also like a variety of perspectives on some of these like challenging or controversial issues. So I was really excited to talk to Garth. He overachieved all of my expectations in that I just love the conversation. He's so passionate about what we do and comes from like this just fantastic place. And he had like his belief in, for instance, like that Xenon works. Like, he has really strong anecdotal personal experience like that I didn't know about, that he had summited Everest 3 years previously and felt terrible and like really struggled. And then this time had a really different experience. It's like, that's a very meaningful piece of information that if nothing else makes me want to see Xenon to actually be effectively studied to find out if it is like, Viagra and some of these other things that everyone started taking and then figured out wasn't going to do the trick, or something like dexamethasone that lots of people know helps but feel like it's cheating. Like, and then the Xenon, and we don't know where it fits on that spectrum yet. And the only way we will know is to push into like real science and having, conversations amongst the community. And this is, I thought Garth was a great proponent for it, and also like a great next step in that conversation. So I think it's a good one. I hope listeners do as well.
Absolutely. Well, stay tuned for an interview with Garth Miller. All right, welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. And today on the episode, we've got Garth Miller. Garth, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Adrian. Thanks very much for having me on. Appreciate the invite.
Oh, this one's been a long time in coming. We're so psyched to have you on. Almost maybe it is a full year since your ascent, which we'll get into. But yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, I think we started talking about this 6 months ago, maybe. So super happy to be here to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into who you are and your experiences, we are wrapping up the tail end of the Everest season, 2026 Everest season. We're recording here on May 27th. And I just wanted to hear, have you been following along this season? Obviously, you climbed Everest last season as part of a team. And is Everest still a big part of your day-to-day life come, a year later in the month of May? Or do you kind of let it go and just kind of live your life and do other things?
You can't let it go. It's impossible. So like Adrian, right? It's I think it's a drug, and I am hopelessly hooked on it. In fact, I was just saying before we went live that we should have been on the mountain on the north side now. So I've got massive FOMO. I've been following the season. What a season. What a ride, though. It's pretty crazy. And I think probably today we've seen pretty much the last summits, right? Maybe a couple of FKTs going in by tomorrow morning. But
yeah, I think that's right. Maybe there's one more FKT attempt still happening.
Carl,
Sam, you've got news?
Carl turned on his attempt just somewhere above Camp 4, and they just didn't feel they had it in them together as a group of two, and so they turned, and it sounds like Tyler is on his way somewhere on the mountain right now with oxygen. So still some last climbers, but again, we're recording on the 27th, and the word is the icefall is going to close or be taken apart on the 29th. So getting close. And so Garth, what stories kind of piqued your interest this year? What were you following? Is there anything that really got you excited, or something that you just couldn't wait to get the answer on?
Yeah, so I guess it's a perspective thing, isn't it? The big news at the beginning of the season was the delay in getting the route fixed through the icefall because of that massive Sirac. I think the interesting thing that came out of that is the way the operators and the icefall doctors work together to solve that problem. And then we saw that again higher on the mountain above Camp 4. We saw teams getting involved with the guys that were contracted to fix to the summit. So it seems like there was really good teamwork amongst the Nepali operators this year, which is a good news story. And then how they got the season back on track super quickly. So I think come a week or 10 days after the icefall was fixed and the route opened, the season was being described very quickly as a normal season.
That's right.
So and that's going to be a good thing. The fact that the infrastructure on the mountain is working faster, it's more agile, that bodes well for when things go wrong, and they need to work together to recover a situation that has perhaps been unfortunate.
And you're in aviation, Garth. Maybe we'll touch on that at some point. But one of the things that I found interesting this year and has been building over the past couple of years is this idea of using drones to support Sherpa in moving equipment on the mountain.
100%.
Is that something you saw last year? And is your sense that was an important piece of the logistics this year?
Yeah, there was a bit of a mix-up with the drones. Once we got started with the season, then there was a stall on or a stop on the drones for a bit, and I'm not quite sure what went on there. They're trying to introduce some American drones into the system, and whatever happened, it derailed. But they got back going again. I'm not sure if there was a significant difference this year compared to last in the use of drones and the volume of kit and equipment going up and refuse and waste coming down. But they seem to fly the drones off the climbing route. So
great.
And I know we'll come on
to
my I mean, I think we'll come on to my trip last year in a little bit, but we only went through the icefall once on the way up and once on the way down, and I must say I didn't see a single drone.
Yeah.
So it's not like this heavily traffic thing. What we did see this year was less helicopter activity above the icefall. So, and I think that's probably a good thing. One helicopter accident will be a disaster, and I suspect it's inevitable in a country where there's a still maturing aviation safety system, and these machines are operating at the very limit of what they're capable of doing. So I'm concerned about the use of helicopters above base camp.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And it's probably, for our clients at Alpenglow Expeditions, probably the biggest loss we have to, or risk we have to really discuss on north side versus south side, the big downside of the north side, other than stress of getting permits, as shown this year, is lack of any sort of helicopter medical rescue support. And while, I think there's also a risk when they are available of them becoming a crutch and maybe affecting decision making. Overall, if we just look at the Alps as an example, having helicopters there are a huge safety factor. But you're right, the fact that the edge that they're flying on, from my understanding from helicopter pilot friends who work there quite a bit, we can easily imagine where things could go wrong.
Yeah. And it's risky shift. Okay. Just because it works doesn't mean that it works, if you know what I mean. You don't know how lucky you are until the luck runs out, I suspect. So I'm concerned about the helicopters. And you're right to reference the crutch, because a lot of inexperienced climbers on the mountain on the south side will be banking on that helicopter rescue. And when things go sideways, there's absolutely no guarantee that one will be available, that the weather will be on side, and that a rescue will be an option. It was interesting to see Global Rescue come in and weigh in on long line rescues this year as well. So
yes,
it's been a really interesting year. And I think it's easy to say it's a turning point, but honestly, I'm not sure it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of turning points, right? Like
it's been a long turn.
Yeah. But really, this industry is still so new, right? Like in many ways, if we think about, we had Will Cockrell on the podcast a few episodes again, who wrote Everest Inc., which I really enjoyed. But one of the things that kind of spoke to, like, this industry really only started 30 years ago. And with so much growth in it, there's so much being figured out every year. So, I do think this year could be a turning point. There's just been a lot of turning points. And ultimately, as the industry continues to grow, I think regulations will ultimately have to catch up, and actually enforceable regulations and government work around that. Personally, in the same way we saw in Argentina and Aconcagua and on Denali here in the United States, when they were unregulated, they got really messy. And unfortunately, our commercial interests often need some guardrails. And I think that's still being kind of figured out.
I think in general, if it took, let's go with Will Cockrell's line of Everest becoming a commercial thing in the mid-90s. If an industry outside of mountaineering took 30 years to reach maturity, you'd say that's a very, very long time. But with the flip from 80% Western-led expedition operators to 80-90% Nepali, we're going through a rebirth, and they're going to have to do their own learning. And I suspect that's why we're seeing this kind of stepped drift towards maturity.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good perspective, that maybe that's actually slow. To me, it feels fast, but in my head, it might be because I'm comparing climbing Everest as a commercial, let's compare commercial space travel or, commercial moon visits. Like, I really do think it's going to take decades to go from the first humans who did it to it just being a regular commercial thing with high levels of safety. And I kind of compare climbing Everest to that, but that's my little world, my little bias.
So, Garth, obviously we have you on to talk about Everest, but before we get too far into the conversation, we kind of want to hear about you and who you are, what you do, and how Everest fits into the picture for you.
Yeah. So, my climbing isn't my profession; it is a long-held passion. So my background is from the Royal Gurkha Rifles, which is if you're familiar with Nepal, you might be familiar with two communities from Nepal, the Sherpa community and the Gurkha community. And the Gurkhas are, in effect, a warrior class from Nepal that the British Army recruit and have been recruiting for over 200 years. And I had the privilege of serving with the Gurkhas in the British Army. So serving in a Nepalese regiment in the British Army in the jungle in Borneo for a few years. Our working language was Nepalese. I spent a lot of time in Nepal from the mid-90s onwards. It's always been part of my life. Nepal has always been part of my life. And what attracted me to that regiment was the opportunity to get out and go climbing in the Himalayas. And that's what the army offered me. And I took the opportunity. So I've been going to the Himalayas since 97, I guess. My first trip to Everest was 2004 on the north side, however.
All right.
And I turned back at the second step. And I recognize
you were up there.
The mountain is, oh, God damn it. Yeah. It was brutal.
What was the 10 second, like, what was the reason for turning around? Was it weather or oxygen?
So it's amazing. It wasn't even 10 seconds. 1 minute I was going up and the next minute I was going down. So, wow. And as I started going down, I was thinking, wow, that was actually a really easy decision. And what happened was I found myself alone in really bad weather with a failed oxygen system, at second step. So we were doing it on an absolute shoestring. So there was no Sherpa support. And we got the cheapest Everest expedition we could find. No Sherpa support, high on the mountain. My little merry band of four, we'd fragmented. One of the guys had an asthma attack. And actually his regulator, the hose somehow came out and it triggered an asthma attack. He turned around and went down. One of the guys wasn't feeling it and made the decision to descend. And my other mate, we got separated and just never linked up again. And I remember looking over the edge down the Kangshung face at the storm, like looking down on the lightning and the swirling clouds and thinking how beautiful it was, but not at all realizing that at some point that's going to hit the east face and shoot skywards. And of course that's what happened. And it just appeared without warning. And I was using a Poisk oxygen system. It was one of the first years that Summit had a mature system on the mountain. Right. In fact, they were using the Pulse system at the time.
Yep. Pulse on demand system. It's still the dream. We've been chasing it for what is that? 2 decades.
Watch this space. Watch this space.
Totally.
So, but I was using the Poise system and it just stopped.
Yep.
And how I became aware of that was a series of panic attacks. So, and I'm assuming this is because whenever I was working hard, let's say at the first step, for example, I still had the mask on, wasn't producing any oxygen, so I was rebreathing my exhaled air.
Yep.
And the physiological impact of that was a panic attack. And at the first step, I had this panic attack while I was halfway up, and I thought I'm going to go down, but I couldn't go down because there was someone beneath me. So I climbed to the top and just waited for them to come through. But by that point, I was fine. I'd been sitting for 5 minutes or so and I'd recovered myself. So I carried on, then had another one. And then I had a third and I ripped the mask off and I was taking my down suit off and I realized this is a really bad place to be.
Bad sign.
And well, so my abiding memory was that this is, I know they've stripped a lot of the bodies off, particularly the north side, but that's what the bodies looked like. They were kind of half dressed. And
absolutely.
So I thought, this is a spectacularly bad sign. So I turned around and went down. Super easy decision, and then had to live with that for decades until I went back again. I continued to climb in the high mountains. I climbed in Pakistan, but had on Broad Peak K2, had 3 very close calls on K2, any one of which could have been an absolute disaster. Yeah, that stopped me from climbing in the high mountains, actually, for a long time, until a friend of mine from the Gurkhas had an accident and became a tetraplegic, sadly. And I was sitting in the ICU with him, and he was talking about when you get to our age, which was 45 at the time. So I'd been out of 8,000 meter peaks for 10 years. And he said, when you get to our age, you've really done everything you're going to do as a man. And I was determined that wasn't going to be the case with me. So I left the hotel and pondered my navel for a bit. Who did I want to be when I was younger? Where am I on that track? How do I identify? And I identified very much as a climber, as a mountaineer, and found a way back to the mountains. So that's my Everest story.
Wow, that's wild. And so you went back in 2022, is that right? To summit Everest from the south side?
Yeah. So that was I can't remember if it was a gap in COVID or just at the very end of COVID. So the expedition spun up really quickly when it looked like we're going to get the green light to go.
Yep.
And I had 21 days off work. So I flew in from somewhere to London and then went straight out to Nepal and got back. Having showered once on the mountain, I flew back to London, in Kathmandu airport. I had a wash in the toilets in Kathmandu airport, came back, got home, had a shower, went back to work. Yes. So 21 days, and that was an Everest Lhotse double.
Nice. So you're very much speaking our language. As you know, we just love these, like what we call at Alpenglow rapid ascent expeditions, where we're trying to figure out how to take out a lot of the fluff while maintaining the core and power of the experience and doing them faster. The idea, I did a lot of 70-day expeditions, the old Russell Brice style, when everyone had to show up on day one and no one left until day last. And you drank whiskey and played cards, when you weren't climbing, and you filled 2.5 months that way. And much of my life has been trying to figure out how to not just do that, because it turns out it's really bad on relationships and friendships and business and lots of other things. But 21 days is fast. Can you just give us a little bit of like how that worked? Did you pre-acclimatize? Did you use helis at any point? And these are, I want to be very clear, for me, these are not negatives. They're just tools that we're potentially using to make our expeditions faster. So what did you use and how did you acclimatize?
Yeah, so I very much looked at what you were doing at the time, Adrian. In fact, you may not remember it, but I did reach out to you and say, hey, I want to go fast. I'm curious as to how fast I can go.
Amazing.
And
gosh, I hope I responded.
You did not respond.
Calling him out.
But I tried the pre-acclimatization thing using the tent on Ama Dablam and did I think it was 12 days from London to the top and back. And that was kind of feeling it out. And then I did exactly the same protocol then for Everest. So accumulated a lot of time in the tent. So around about 300 hours sleeping in the tent and about 100 hours training with the mask on. My understanding is that though both of those modalities create different responses. So one helps thicken the blood, increase the number of red blood cells, and the other helps you actually draw on it. I just became super focused on that. And then flew out.
Were you doing blood work along the way? Are you able to, like, at least anecdotally?
Not that time.
Okay.
No. Again, quite low budget. With a Nepali operator, great Nepali operator. And then flew to Lhotse. I think it's Lhotse where the helicopters typically split, isn't it? From the 4 to the 2 to go up to base camp.
That's relatively common. Lhotse is a little off the main track. You can do it in Namche, you can do it in Lhotse. People might go as far as Ferriche, which is kind of in the split of the valley.
Yeah, it might have been Ferriche. It was all very rapid.
Totally.
But the decision was based on cost.
Yep.
So I didn't want to go all the way to base camp because I didn't want to land, have a stroke, and for the whole thing to be over. So although it had worked in Ama Dablam, the base camp significantly lower, and I had walked from Lukla on that Ama Dablam expedition. So I was still kind of feeling my way, experimenting, and the price of the helicopter to Ferriche and Lhotse was different, and I went with the cheaper option.
Makes sense. Said
and
you
then
walked
just
to
spent
base
the night.
camp?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
walked up. So spent the night, walked up to base camp, and settled in. Did one rotation, and then went for it. And that was hard. So I found it really difficult, but I'm quite used to suffering from my time in the military.
Yes.
So I just kind of endured it and got there. Actually, the higher I got, the better I felt. Certainly above Camp 4, I felt pretty strong, I would say. But I was hurting at times on that trip, 100%.
And so you had waited decades for this. Did it kind of like, was it everything you had dreamed of? And like, you know, what was Everest to you after succeeding in 2022?
Yeah, so it's the obvious question, one I should have prepared for. But I don't really have the vocabulary to put it into words. It's kind of like Vietnam. If you weren't there, you won't really understand. It just filled me with awe. The surprising thing actually is, as soon as I got there, I felt like I'd exercised some demons from having lived almost 20 years as the person that failed to get to the top of Everest. So I was very satisfied and proud that I had achieved it. I was very focused on the double, so I still had a long way to go. I was very aware of that, and I had to get down quickly as well. So there was a lot going on the summit, but the moment on top was just absolutely magical. We had the summit completely to ourselves. So I arrived with my Sherpa, Pasang, and we hugged. He put a prayer flag around the pole on the summit, and we prayed for a bit. And I'm not a religious person at all. But it seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And we cried a little bit, and then we just enjoyed it for about 40 minutes, and then turned around and got back to the task at hand, which was getting down so we could go for Lhotse. What I became aware of was I had this profound sense of, this is what people mean when they say the journey is the important bit, right? Because the summit is a summit, and that's great, but then it was gone. And as soon as I turned and started going down the mountain, I had this real sense of, the journey was the thing. And it sounds a bit trite to say it, but who you become in the pursuit of the goal. Maybe it's an age-related thing as well, or maybe it's achieving a massive goal that, when the odds are stacked against you. But I definitely had this sense of, it wasn't just the summit, it was everything that came in the build-up to it. The people I'd met, the friendships I'd built, and the discipline I had learned to get to a place where it was possible.
And did 21 days at the time, did that feel like as fast as you could imagine? So you did the double, it went great, but it was hard. Where did obviously we know what's coming next, but like, where did you end when you did 21 days?
Yeah, so I came away a little frustrated. I thought, if all the stars aligned, 16 might be possible. So I lost a couple of days due kit not coming into the country with me, unfortunately. So there was a couple of days lost in Kathmandu. Could have gone to base camp direct, saved probably 36 hours there, and I had a couple of days of sickness in base camp. So I lost a couple of days there. So I definitely, and I could have not done Lhotse. I could have just headed straight down. So I knew it was possible to go faster. And I was aware of Roxy's expedition as well.
Yeah.
In fact, we spoke just last week about maybe doing something together next year.
So cool. I love it.
Yeah, I came away from that trip wondering how fast is it possible to go? And that became my thing, which just occupied me 24/7. And then I put the feelers out. So I put the feelers out to scientists. I put the feelers out to expedition operators, and we went with Furtenbach Adventures. Went with Lucas, and I called Lucas, and the intent was to see if I could talk him around to letting me have a shot at a 2-week trip. And by the end of the phone conversation, we'd agreed that we could probably do it in 7 days.
You're doing a week.
Yeah. And we weren't even drinking. So, yeah.
That's the way the best adventures come. I love it. And just for audience, we should actually maybe have Roxanne on at some point. But so in 2019, I think it was 18 or
Yeah.
19, Roxana, with support from Lydia Brady, one of our guides in Alpenglow expeditions, summited Everest 14 days USA to USA. And it somewhat maybe has some of the same fire that you're speaking to. Like, she obviously was a phenomenal athlete, had worked with Goo for a long time, so really understood the nutrition side and just really believed things could be done much faster. And she came to us with this idea, like, loads of people have now done the mountain in 30 days. That's almost becoming standard for some operators like us. Now someone's done it in, 3-week expeditions were starting to be out there, and she wanted to do it faster. And so we came up with this 2-week idea, which she ultimately was successful with. And it was so rad to be a part of, right? Because it was very painful. It was very on the edge. There was no Everest has never been easy, and this certainly was not easy. And it was it was fun to see her accomplish it. And maybe similar to you, we finished the 2-week expedition, and we were like, well, it's certainly possible to go faster. Can we, what would that look like, and who would it be that would allow it to go faster while still maybe, doing it in a style that we're proud of, whatever that means to each individual.
Yeah.
And
I mean, she's a super athlete, right?
Athlete.
So I certainly used to enter in all these ultra marathons, but she wins them.
Right.
So I was always bringing up the rear and taking part, but she was podiuming in all of these events. So,
Sure.
And I think that's really important. The shape you're in from an aerobic capacity, cardio place before going into the tent is really important, because that really impacts your ability to train and recover, right?
Yeah.
So,
and one question along those lines before we move into the next trip. So we set this, and again, these are just lines, right? We all choose our lines of how we climb the mountain, and Sam and I talk a lot about this. And so with Roxana's project, one of the rules we set was we would only do it if she agreed, like, the oxygen use would look similar to what Alpenglow does. And so for us, that's no oxygen before 7,000 meters on the mountain to kind of prove that you can't survive at that, because my philosophy is then that means you can probably survive with oxygen at 9,000 meters if the shit hits the fan. You've kind of proven it. So no oxygen below 7, and then no flow rate above 4 liters is kind of like, now again, I understand that's totally my silly line in the sand, but that's where I've put it. And so Roxanne kind of agreed to that, and that's what she did. And of course, there were discussions on the mountain as things got really, really hard, especially getting back down, whether to adjust those expectations. And of course, there's always safety, where of course you use whatever means necessary, but staying in this space of sport instead of safety. And she maintained, she dug really deep and didn't need to utilize any more support than our standard trip. Is that something you thought about in 22 or as you were going towards 25? Or
yeah, these are great philosophical discussion points. So my position on oxygen is, if you're going to use it, right? No one, and I know this is a live topic of discussion with you, Adrian, for sure. But no, it's like getting a university degree, a college degree. And it seems really important at the time. But down the road, 10, 20 years after graduation, whatever, no one cares. If they even ask if you have a college degree, they might be interested in the institution or the subject, rarely both. So, and I see oxygen the same way. If you're going to use it, use it. Who's interested in flow rate? Who's interested in at what point you start using it? But in our time on the mountain, Adrian, and I think your first time on Everest was probably around about the same time as me, maybe the year before.
2008. So
2008. Oh, I'm way older. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
When we were getting into 8,000 meter peaks, people used oxygen on the big ones, the big 5. And if you're talking about Shish or Chiwoyu or Manaslu, Broad Peak, the Gasherbums, people didn't use oxygen. right? It was Makalu and above, really. And now doing Makalu, no O2, and I think you've done it.
With O2, not
Okay.
without. Tried without and failed.
Is a phenomenal achievement, right?
Yep.
So just summiting it is a phenomenal achievement. But it's interesting how the philosophy and around oxygen has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly on Everest, people have gone from just using oxygen above Camp 4 or above 8,000 meters on the north side, and it's just over the years eroded and got
That's
lower
right.
and lower. And now we're seeing people using oxygen on Kilimanjaro and Aconcagua.
Absolutely.
So the world's going a little bit mad. But yes, that's a whole different debate. That's probably a podcast in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the conversation and was interested in your perspective because, like, I think you're absolutely right. The standard, the Russell set when I moved into the industry, which was no more than 2-liter flow, and no putting on oxygen below 7,300 meters. Like, Alpenglow has changed that, and so exactly to your point, like that level's been changing based on different companies and ideas and things like that for a long time. And ultimately, I think anyone should be able to climb the mountain any way they derive pride and stoke from, like that, as long as it's maintains a level of safety for everybody involved.
So can I think these
go ahead.
So obviously you're right, and with I know we're going to come on to Xenon in a minute, but with the Xenon climb, and we became known as the X-Men of Everest, which I thought was pretty cool. Some of the guys hated it, but I thought it was quite cool.
I love that.
So we wanted to show that there was a different way to skin the cat. So, but at no point did we think that this is the only way to do it. So you can do it solo. Regulations permitting, you can do it with O2. Without O2, you can siege the mountain. You can, whatever way you want. You can do it in a single push. Whatever it is you want to do, that's fine. Our way is just another way of tackling it. But I think when it comes to the Xenon attempt, we were very keen to reduce our footprint on the mountain, the infrastructure that we used. We used, and this surprised me, we used less oxygen than the regular flash speed clients on the mountain. And I know there was a lot of talk on your podcast as well about rumors that they're using 8 liters a minute, and we just weren't. So Lucas is pretty hard over against people cranking it that high. And I think there's diminishing returns.
This is why we need you here, Garth. go ahead.
Let's start from the beginning, Garth. I'd love to hear, you were one of 4 climbers on the Xenon attempt or successful climb last season. You guys were round trip from London to the top of Everest and back in how many days?
6.5 days.
6.5 days.
So cool.
Can you tell us, I do want to hear a little bit more about the initial conversation with Lucas, but we'll maybe save that. Can you tell us, like, from, when you guys started prepping through returning to London, kind of what the series of events looked like, what you did, where, and how?
So phoned Lucas, and we got talking about how fast is possible. And we came, Lucas had been doing a lot of work with an anesthesiologist, an anesthetist called Michael Fries from a hospital in Germany. And they had been testing on lower mountains the idea of the protective qualities of Xenon. So he kind of thought, here I've got a guy that, like I said earlier, is used to suffering. He's summited the mountain before. Yeah, he's like, why don't we, a bit like you and Roxy, Adrian, like why don't we see how far we can go with this? And I said, great. Can I bring some friends? And he said, absolutely. And then that's where we got the team together. I think what was attractive to Lucas was our background. From a physical fitness perspective, experienced mountaineers, and and he could count on us to do the work. And I don't know how often you find in the run up to Everest season, Adrian, people that have signed up to trips that simply don't follow the protocol, who aren't adapting to the altitude as well as they might. So he could be reasonably confident that we would put in the work up front. And that's exactly what we did. We went absolutely bananas with it, and it became hugely competitive.
All of you were former military, or?
Yeah. So all from the same Special Forces community.
All right.
In British Army and Royal Marines, 2 and 2. So an interesting dynamic. and yeah, we treated it like a Special Forces mission. So all the prep, all the red teaming, all the war gaming, all the pace planning, asking ourselves what if, and thinking around these problems. And the Xenon became very important, not least because we all have jobs and families, but because we're looking at ways of mitigating risk. And not only that, but by reducing our time on the mountain, we reduced the likelihood of getting sick. So as you know, just on the trek in, obviously on the north side, you can drive to the base camp, but on the trek in Nepal, anything can happen, right?
Yes.
And I've done that trek a lot. You can be knocked off the trail by a yak. The most random stuff can happen, but the classic is getting some kind of DNV or the Khumbu cough just from breathing dust on the trails the whole way up and the cold air. So, and I know, there is a narrative around a big part of an Everest expedition is the trek in, but I can divorce the two. Having done both, and I've done the 74-day expedition on the north side, and I've trekked to base camp as well. So I'm able to separate the two, and climbing the mountain is a different sport. And if I'm going to the mountain, I'm going to perform. I don't want to risk getting DNV or having a debilitating cough just on the hike to the start line.
100%. We tell people all the time, like the trek on the south side is something every person who loves the mountain should do one day. But I love the idea and highly recommend as well exactly how you described it. Separate it from your climb. It's an amazing thing to do with family, to do in a different scenario. But the likelihood of getting that sickness that could really affect an entire trip, I feel very strong.
The drive to Chamonix has nothing to do with the climb of Mont Blanc.
Right. Exactly right.
So I've got no problem with arriving at base camp and starting. And I recognize you're starting from 5,400 meters. And sorry, being British, I speak in meters, not feet, but you guys can do the math. So we attacked the tent, 3 different modalities, methodologies. So we did the sleeping, we did the mask on training, and we did intermittent hypoxic exposure, which is the breathing super high altitude air. 5 minutes on, let our SpO2 recover to 96, 98%, and then 5 minutes on again, and just sitting on the couch watching TV while we're doing that.
Just mild torture techniques.
Yeah. But it just became, it was part of the business of trying to reduce the time on the mountain.
And Garth, I think you said in 2022 you did like 300 hours sleeping in the tent and 100 hours training in the tent. Did you follow a similar program, or did you up the pre-acclimatization from that previous experience?
Yeah, so we upped it. We're talking around for the team, it was from around 550 to 650 hours.
And did all 4 members have quite a bit of real altitude experience already from previous trips? You were obviously highly experienced.
Yeah, so I was the only one to have any experience above 8,000.
Okay.
But yeah, they're all experienced mountaineers. Al Carnes was a Royal Marine mountain leader, so super experienced at operating in the cold and the Arctic is their speciality, but a trained mountaineer, which came to the fore as we were descending the mountain, and we had one of the guys was quite sick, so that employed Al's mountain leader experience, and also from the guys operating in really dodgy weather around the world, and in our line of work, you can't just stay in the cabin. If the weather's bad, you're out and you're doing what you've got to do, right? And I remember, and I hope we come back to it later if we don't remind me, there was a bit of a decision point to be made just below the South Summit when the weather was absolutely terrible. The worst I've experienced at altitude. Our lead Sherpa, Pasang, 6-time summiter, just got his 8th yesterday. He said, "This is it. We have to turn around." And I'm having a conversation with Pasang, and in the background, I could hear Stas and Al, 2 of the guys from the team, saying, "I've been colder in Norway. I've had worse weather in Scotland. let's just keep going." So,
and you did.
Yeah. So just lost my train of thought, but we treated it like a special forces mission. We wanted to get in, do the job, get out, stay. We put on weight because we absolutely attacked the lounge in Doha on the way back to London in Qatar and ate our body weight. In fact, we cleared the lounge out of food. So we came back heavier than we were when we left. And which is quite unusual for an Everest expedition.
Absolutely.
But felt fine 100% of the time. So to keep going in a kind of chronological way, 2 weeks before we flew out to Nepal, we went to Germany and we had this infusion of Xenon gas. So a 25-minute exposure to it, just like breathing oxygen, only there was a xenon mixture in it. And that was to give our blood time to react to the treatment. And that was it. That was our only exposure to mountain. And everyone on the mountain was asking us, "Are you..." Because we looked different on the mountain. We were all in really cool through dark summit suits, so all in black, and we were always within an arm's reach of each other. We were an absolute unit going up the mountain. And they're like, "Are you guys breathing xenon now?" No, this is like, forget about the xenon. This is just oxygen like you're breathing.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference. Let's spend 2 minutes on Xenon, or Xenon. You're obviously, knowing none of us are scientists on this call or medical doctors, but your current understanding of like what it did, why you chose to use it, and like you said, just a single 25-minute use 2 weeks before. What did you hope it would do, and then what did you experience based on your previous experience on the mountain?
So that's the crux of it, isn't it? Right. What we were looking for, the story of the expedition, and I will answer your question, but in a roundabout way, the story of the expedition was speed. What happened in the media was they conflated xenon with speed. Mm-hmm. And in actual fact, it was about safety. So xenon, and I know there are doubters out there, Sam, but Xenon's got clinically proven neuroprotective and cardiopulmonary protective properties, and that's what we wanted to harness. So we weren't doing it to increase our VO2 max. We were doing it to protect us as we climbed quickly to the top, not to propel us to the top, if that makes sense. One of the guys on the team has a traumatic brain injury from his military service. He was shot in the head. And and there are neuroprotective qualities that we were keen to explore. And one of the other guys was a breacher, an explosive breacher in operations in Afghanistan, and was exposed to a lot of overblast pressure from that. So was also keen to explore it. And from our background in the military, we were keen to explore whether there was a military application to the use of xenon. So there are a number of reasons why we're doing it, but none of it was to... so apparently it is used in rockets to propel rockets, but it doesn't propel people up the mountain. So you've got to do that yourself.
And Garth, are there any other uses of xenon in the world today that are comparable or that you guys pulled inspiration from? Or kind of how did I guess, how did Lucas first kind of land on Xenon having these protective qualities?
I can't speak for Lucas. You should absolutely get him on the podcast.
Yes, it's a goal. We've been trying.
But he's working hand in glove with Michael Fries, an anesthesiologist, to use the American phrase, who's been doing a lot of research on it. A professor of medicine from Germany. And I believe the way it worked is Michael reached out to Lucas and said, I think this has got read across to altitude. And then Lucas and some of his guys tried it on Aconcagua. That was the genesis of it, and it seemed to work. I'm keen to point out we weren't a scientific experiment.
Sure.
So we were very much belt and braces. So we still did we overkill on the tents. I'm not sure the science has caught up with the practice yet. And exactly the same way you saw, Adrian, when you started using the hypoxic tents.
Absolutely.
It was snake oil, and there were naysayers, including some really high profile mountaineers. But anecdotally, it seemed to work, and you're prepared to go with that, and you've had huge success with it. And Same with us and Xenon. And occasionally, the way I look at it is, occasionally you will have in sport a step change in the sport because an athlete does something different, right? And sometimes it will be science led, but usually I'm thinking of the Fosbury flop, the high jump where you go over backwards instead of the olden days where you try to scissor kick over it. And this guy tried a different technique, and it transformed the sport of high jump. And then you have the sports scientists coming afterwards trying to deconstruct that change. What's the mechanism here that makes it different? In that case, it's keeping your center of gravity below the height of the bar, right? So we were happy to go with the information we had. There's absolutely no downside to it. It's a noble gas. There's no downside to taking it. It's used in medicine a lot around the world. That was your question, which I will get back to in a second. And kind of be ahead of the science. But we weren't a controlled experiment or anything like that. So we didn't have climbers alongside us that weren't using it. We didn't have placebos.
Totally.
It was
if one or two of you had gotten placebo Xenon. I love it though.
The guys
and did the researcher come with you, or no? Was the researcher in base camp?
No, we didn't. We did have a doctor in base camp.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, back to your question, then I'll get back to base camp in the mountain. So it's used as an anesthetic. And that's where we took a lot of heat, actually, because people were really concerned that have drowsy mountaineers stumbling through the ice fall. And we used it at sub-anesthetic levels. And the mechanism is totally different. But
you used it weeks earlier, didn't you?
And weeks earlier. So, the mechanism, where Xenon is used in medicine is if there's going to be a hypoxic insult during operating. So if the brain is going to be starved of oxygen, or if the cardiopulmonary system is going to be starved of oxygen, a lot of countries use Xenon. Quite expensive, so not all countries use it. And the biggest producer of Xenon, I understand, is Ukraine. So it's a pretty rare commodity at the moment. And it was that we were keen to capture the neuroprotective qualities, so to protect us from HACE and HAPE, because we knew we were going to be going up fast. And unfortunately, the story got out that that conflated Xenon with speed, and we weren't able to catch that once the word got out.
And Garth, I remember early on when the story came out, there was talks of you guys having another exposure in Kathmandu. Was that ever part of the equation, or was it only planned to be that one?
No, I think there's only one machine that does the mixture like that.
Got it.
So, which is in Germany. And I suspect if you did it in Kathmandu, it's probably a little bit close to the expedition. You need to give it time to have its maximum effect. And it doesn't last forever either. So, you're definitely operating within like a 28-day window from having it.
And is that how it's used in surgery as well, or anesthesia, that it's given weeks before the surgery, or is it given during the surgery?
Not a medical doctor.
Okay.
That's a really good question.
That's totally a fair answer.
So let's fast forward.
Wait, can I ask one more question before we fast forward?
Fine.
Again, feel free to, we can pick someone else's brain. Do you know what the pathway is that gives it neuroprotective or cardiopulmonary protection?
Yeah, so it's really complicated. And this is sidestepping the question. So I went deep on the research when I was trying to validate it in my own mind. And I learned a lot about HIF-1 alpha inhibitors. And I'm going to get the letters in the wrong order.
But that's okay, because I have no idea.
So clinical studies have shown 3 pathways that it helps.
Okay.
It helps you endure hypoxic insults. And the more I learned about it, the less I understood it.
All right.
So it's like quantum theory, quantum mechanics. If you think you understand it, you probably don't, unless you're a physics lecturer.
Totally.
And with this, I know post-COVID, we all think we're microbiologists, and
we're not.
And when an airplane crashes, we all become air crash investigators. But the fact is that there is expertise in it that I'm just not able to comprehend and understand. But I satisfied myself, and I've been to one of the best universities in the world with a master's degree. I have a technical job, but it's a very slippery concept.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated. I really appreciate what you said about these things that change sport, and even using the example of hypoxic tents. That's the science coming first or the sport coming first. To me, it doesn't really matter in some ways, as long as we're maintaining the safety of our clients and Sherpa and the people working with us and things like that as we experiment. And the interesting part is in my 25-year career in this, there's probably been 6 or 7 different prescription medications and or tools like pre-acclimatization rapid ascent tents that have come around. And rapid ascent tent, pre-acclimatization in tents has stuck. Many of the others have not. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't have been experimented with, but it does give me a healthy dose of is it going to work? We don't. This is why my next question is going to be your anecdotal experience, because that's all we have right now, right? Which is really exciting, and obviously tells you or tells Lucas or tells someone else, should we try to get 100 more people to do this to find out if there's something there?
Yeah.
Examples of things that didn't work, right? Everyone started taking Viagra prophylactically because it does have some treatment effect in pulmonary edema, but it wasn't effective enough that everyone should be taking it on the mountain. Ginkgo was meant to change the world a decade ago, an over-the-counter supplement. So there have been and then there are things that absolutely massively change the game, like dexamethasone, but we as a community have chosen not to use it in those ways. And so where Xenon fits on that, I think that's the exciting part that we're going to learn over
and we're learning more about medicines as well. So nifedipine used to be a big thing for treating HAPE. And again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I think high altitude medicine has moved away from recommending the use of nifedipine.
Yeah, it moved away and then came back, actually.
They've come back again.
Yeah, exactly right.
So we're always learning. We're always learning is the point. And with this Xenon, we might be 1% off, we might be 10% off, but over time we'll find our way. And our expedition wasn't designed to be a gold standard clinical study. Our expedition was designed to do this. Is it possible to leave Hope, drop the kids at school on Monday, and head out to Nepal, be on the top by Friday morning, and be home with the family in time for Sunday lunch? And that's
I love that framing.
Proved to be.
So let's keep going. So you guys, you did the Xenon exposure, and then you had a weather window that I'm sure was identified, and you flew to Nepal, you flew into base camp. And what did things look like from there?
Yeah. So the Everest summit window is reasonably predictable in the round with the movement of the ITZZ and the monsoon. We took it 2 weeks before the bulk of Everest summits take place, which is that period like 18 to 23 May, I guess. And then we're basically on standby. And what we were looking for were two weather windows, a weather window for the summit. And we were reasonably confident with our background, we could probably move on the mountain where most commercial teams would not. So we were mainly interested in survivable summit winds and temperatures above Camp 4. And we needed another weather window 3 days before that, which would have been a flyable window into base camp for the helicopter. So we needed those two things to line up. And that's what we saw. And we'd moved our flights a couple of times, and then it was time to go. So we bounced through to Kathmandu, walked across the ramp to the other side of the airfield. Helicopter was waiting. I mean, the logistics were just as important, and they were absolutely dialed. And we launched straight through Lukla, straight up to Ferice, and then we split because the helicopters can only take two people from there to the top. So then we arrived in base camp less than 16 hours after leaving London. And we got checked by a doctor at base camp in quite some detail. And I must admit, it was worrying amount of detail. We're all at a certain age, and I thought he's bound to find something. But we were released, and we went into the dining tent, had a pizza, and then started climbing. So we were at base camp for a handful of hours.
Awesome. And then what was your cycle, or what was your climb like?
Yeah, so we went straight to Camp 2, and we spent a night at Camp 2, and then it was absolutely routine from there. Up to Camp 3 for the night, Camp 4, and this is where things started to get quite stressy.
Yeah.
The weather window, there's three main models that people tend to use on the mountain, and they were all contradictory. Yeah, so we were getting fed the information, and it was, do we hold and miss the 7 days? Do we go for it and risk blowing it? We knew at 8,000 meters that evening that the weather was going to be fine, and we knew at the 9,000 meter contour that the weather was going to be fine, but we knew that there was remnants of part of the jet stream. So we knew we were going to have to climb into some really bad, sketchy conditions. Picked our time, and when we unzipped the tent at 10 o'clock, whenever it was, I think it was 10 o'clock, if there was oxygen, we would have been able to strike a match. I mean, it was absolute. The stars were out. It was beautifully calm. Amazing. And I thought, I cannot believe our luck. Absolutely, this is all that talk about the jet stream and this rubbish weather between here and the top. It's rubbish. We've got it wrong. This is going to be plain sailing all the way to the top. And off we went. All fine up past the balcony. And then, a couple of 100 meters shy of the south summit, we climbed into the storm. Still dark, absolutely freezing, and really, really windy. And, I'd be guessing at the wind speed, but it was way outside the bounds of anything that would have been safe. And certainly, if you're running an expedition, Adrian, you 100% would have turned everyone around, and rightly so. But we were definitely men on a mission. And as half of our Sherpa team turned around and went down at that point.
Wow.
And that's when Pasang came up to me and said, to see those lights going down the mountain, the head torches going down the mountain, that's your spare oxygen.
Yeah.
That's any redundancy when it comes to affecting a rescue should something go wrong. So we're fine. We'll pool together what we've got. We can turn it down. We're all feeling great. And we'd felt great all the way up. At every camp, I was going around the guys, how are your fingers and toes and your eyes and your head? And everyone felt 100%, all the way up. It was such a change from doing it just with the pre-acclimatization before. And anytime I've been above 8,000 meters before, I've been suffering, but this was completely different. And I said, look, so having this conversation with Pasang, just give us an extra hour and let's see where we are in an extra hour. And I knew in an hour's time we'd be on the South Summit. I knew the sun would be coming up. And then at that point, you can see the top, the sun starting to warm your bones, and barring disaster, nothing's going to stop you. So he agreed to the extra hour, and then we got to the South Summit, and it was like just popping out, and it was perfect. As soon as the sun came up, the wind dropped, the clouds parted, we could see the summit, and
amazing.
We arrived on the summit in a little train together, and got this picture on top. One of the guys, Al, pulled out a Union Jack, which I didn't know he had, and held it above us. And there's this great picture, I don't know whether you've seen it, of the four of us in our cool through dark suits with this Union Jack flying above us. It's pretty iconic, I think.
Pretty inspiring.
Captures the expedition beautifully.
And did you guys hang out on the summit, or were you like, all right, we're on the clock, we got 7 days, we got to go?
We stayed there for about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and turned around and started going down. And went down to Camp 2 that night, and then straight down to base camp, quick wash at base camp, packed up whatever kit was left there, and onto the helicopters and gone. Back into Kathmandu, pizza and a beer at Fire and Ice, and then our international flights home. Yeah.
And so you said all four of you felt great. Was that pretty much throughout? Like everyone felt strong and healthy. And before, I have so many questions or thoughts, but first, congratulations. So rad. Like I think like the idea of a week-long climb of Everest is so wild, right? And like, of course, it touches, like we said, on so many things that I love about like trying to figure out these pieces. And you mentioned like logistics being so important, and kudos to Lucas and Ferdenbach. Like, to me, when we started moving faster, that was actually the harder part. We found people, just like you're saying, people staying healthier, people were less likely to go home because of like work reasons or family reasons or all these things,
100%.
like all these benefits to the individual, but the logistics were fucking hard. Like, because if the heli doesn't fly, or the Sherpa like team doesn't get everything in place in time, or all these different things, the logistics piece is so important. So I do want to shout that out. Like, kudos to the team you went with to nail that is remarkable.
Yeah, they were a machine right from the beginning, taking us through the hypoxic preparation. So they'd done it in a way that I hadn't experienced before. So we're doing rotations using the tent rather than just increasing, plateauing, increasing. So we simulated the rotations on the mountain in the last few days before getting there. Yeah, I mean, it of course, there are some things that you could iron it out, and you could maybe go a little bit faster, but it's risk and reward. You'd be betting a lot to knock 24 hours off, which I'm not particularly interested in doing. I think we've set the bar, and I'm looking forward to someone doing it faster, as long as they do it safely, as long as they do it in a socially responsible way, as long as they tread lightly on the fragile ecosystem of the high Himalaya, and look after their Sherpa team, who are only human. So we were very aware of that. You can't just blaze your way up the Lhotse face and leave this trail of destruction in your waist. So in your wake. So we were trying to do all of those things. And Lucas works very hard to have a climate neutral setup, which I think is a beacon that should be held up for other operators on the mountain to learn from.
Got my little protect all winters hat on. It's an appropriate talking.
Garth, before Adrian dives into his 150 questions, oxygen. When did you guys start oxygen, and what flow? Were you on the same flow, or did you change flow throughout the climb?
Yeah, so we carried oxygen out of base camp, and we carried it because we just weren't sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure how we were going to feel. And personally, my experience of oxygen, I don't even really notice it on flows of 1 liter a minute. When you're moving and physically active, I honestly don't feel a difference. Maybe I would at high altitude, but I find it more claustrophobic and not a benefit. So we had access to it from base camp, and Lucas provided an extraordinary amount of oxygen, which we didn't use all of. We used less than his normal speed climbers, but I'd try it, decide it wasn't worth it. We were all on it walking out of Camp 2, which is pretty normal nowadays. Like it or not, that's when people are sticking on oxygen now. I was glad to have it. We did get caught in a bit of an avalanche in the Khumbu Icefall. I don't know if you've seen the video. There's a really cool video of this avalanche hitting us as we're moving. It was daylight near the very top of the icefall, and we got caught and kind of buried in spindrifty snow. But having the mask there was quite useful at that point. So, and when it comes to flows, certainly we'd discussed what would be reasonable, but I think by and large we're reasonably disciplined. And what's the convention? Above Camp 2 to Camp 3, 2 liters. Camp 3 to Camp 4 is probably 3 liters. Above Camp 4, 4 liters. But certainly I cranked it if I was moving about the line, for example, from the back to the front, or going over the Geneva Spur. I might have put it up a bit. Certainly the Hillary Step, what's left of it, I cranked it, but I don't think I ever went above 6. And we were aware of the risks of just turning up the gas and going for it.
Sure. Yeah. Sam, I'm giving you space.
Well, I mean, my big question is, like, you've had these 2 experiences in a 3-year span on Everest. And, the big difference, obviously you were moving fast both times, but the big difference is the Xenon. And so I want to just hear your take on, was it a success? And obviously it was a success because the climb was successful, but do you think the Xenon had the impact that you were looking for? And yeah, I'm curious what your perspective is.
I would say it's hard not to get caught up in the hype.
Yeah.
And what the media were mixing up was Lance Armstrong style injecting synthetic EPO into your veins, and us using Xenon to trick the kidney into naturally producing more EPO, which is exactly the same mechanism that the hypoxic tent does. It's exactly the same mechanism, and it's exactly the same mechanism as spending time at real altitude. And there are some small physiological nuances due to pressure difference that can't be fully replicated with the tent and can't be fully replicated with Xenon. But the Xenon, and the hypoxic tent, they cause the same physiological changes in your body as with being at altitude. And that's what we were after. What I didn't notice was any big change in my 10K time. I certainly wasn't, leaping out of bed, feeling 10 years younger. It made a difference to how we felt at altitude in terms of clear head. And I became aware of it when we were having that conversation just below the South Summit with Pasang. So who was saying the expedition really is at a point now where we should be turning around and going down. And I was exploring ways with him that we could convince him to keep climbing up. And I thought, this sounds like summit fever. If it was anyone else, I would say this is summit fever. And the very fact that I was having that thought process and second guessing myself, I thought, wow, it isn't summit fever at all. I'm very clear of mind right now. So, and I don't know what the science says about that. I don't know if there's a link, but I'm 100% putting that down to the Xenon. In fact, on the previous summit, just a couple of years before, I remember very little really of summit day going up, but I've got a very clear recollection of the whole trip.
It sounds like you guys pushed pretty hard, but you all felt good. Do you think you had a pretty good margin of effort in you as a result of you moved fast. And so do you think you could have, spent more time up there or been moving slower and still had a margin of safety?
Yeah, if you look at our Garmin traces, I don't think we're moving any faster than any other fit, acclimatized team on the mountain. We weren't doing anything extraordinary. What we didn't want to do was put ourselves in a hole physically on a day that we weren't going to be able to recover from overnight. So we moved between camps at the same sort of speeds, but we were definitely a freight train that wasn't going to stop once we got going.
And so I get, like I said, I have so many questions. It's so rad. Like, do you think we'll see a lot more 1 week climbs? Do you think should that become more of a standard or one of many ways to climb the mountain? Or like you've accomplished this, you've set this out there, everyone saw it. You experienced a high level of safety and felt great. Like, where do you think it sits going forward?
Yeah, great question. So, and there's a couple of parts to the answer. First of all, I don't think Lucas is advertising week-long trips. And I'm sure there is any number of cash-rich, time-poor guys contacting him saying, hey, quite fancy, I got one of these week-long Everest expeditions.
Absolutely.
And Lucas is a guy like you, Adrian, that absolutely filters his clients.
Yeah.
And I don't think is offering the week thing as an offering. It might be 2 weeks. I don't know where he sits on it. He's a busy guy. He's quite hard to get hold of. But I'm keen to catch him when this Everest season's over and see where he's going with it. But I know he's not offering a week. But maybe if some, and I'm not saying we're extraordinary athletes, but if the right person comes along with the right athletic background and the right climbing resume and discipline, perhaps he would. I don't really know. But the risk, I think, the big risk that no one's talking about with this Xenon thing is another operator trying to emulate it without the controls in place, without the logistics in place, without the strength and depth to his Sherpa team, so that if someone does get in trouble high on the mountain, they're not going to be able to lean in with the support that Lucas and you guys will be able to do. So I think the real risk is someone trying to emulate it without the science background. Right, so pick a percentage. It's 20% Xenon. We can do that. And there is some back alley hospital in Kathmandu offering this treatment, and a new up and coming Nepali operator trying to sell it as an option, and things could get messy really quickly. So I know he's been pretty protective around the precise mixtures of the gas, and not that he's being cagey, but he's being protective of the IP because of the risks associated with someone less qualified trying to emulate it.
Yeah.
Garth, I really liked how you talked about the Xenon having this protective tool rather than performance component to it. Do you think that in your experience with Xenon, do you think that it is a tool that would be beneficial to your average paced climber, or does it pair nicely with the speed ascents because it gives you that added protective level?
Yeah, so it pairs nicely, and that's why we did it. But if we had just gone for a 3-week expedition and taken Xenon, no one would have heard about it, would care about it, and if they did, they'd probably be pretty chill about the whole thing. But what we did with the 7-day thing, I think, is possibly made it look easier than it is. It's still really difficult. And I think probably some of the negativity we've had, negative blowback from some climbers with Everest experience is perhaps they feel that we've trivialized their effort. Climbing Everest, a crowning achievement of their mountaineering career. And here these guys come from nowhere, flash the mountain in 6.5 days and disappear off the radar. And it wasn't like that at all. It was hard work. Sleeping in the tent, as you know, is not a shortcut. Just sleeping in the tent it's
a long cut.
And it's yeah.
We tell people that all the time. I don't think we reduce suffering. Actually, we just shift some of the suffering to home. that you would be experiencing on the mountain or on the trek or wherever it might be. But you're right. It's not, it's still there. It still works.
Yeah. And then there's this argument around the purity of the climbing effort. And you've got to suffer to earn these Himalayan summits. I think you're either part of the old guard or you're open to seeing what's possible. And we just happen to be open to seeing what's possible and trying to solve the problem and in a slightly different way using some innovation. But I must admit, we saw plenty of casualties on the mountain. We saw plenty of bodies on the mountain. And as I was stepping over them, you can't help but think, if you just had Xenon, it could have been a different story. So I'm quite sure it should be part of 8,000 meter climbing from a safety point of view. And I suspect, we've shone a light on what's possible in terms of speed. So those two things will come together.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are related, but they're not twins, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the pro Xenon case. We've been wanting that for a while, and I'm really interested to see how the science might catch up to potentially support that. One question I had, you're mentioning this idea of making it safer. I think my understanding, I don't know if it is your understanding or if you agree, but like the single way we can make the mountains safer is actually more oxygen. And you've mentioned kind of the idea, like if you're using oxygen, why not use it? So why are there even, it sounds like even on your team, there was still an arbitrary line that you weren't using as much oxygen as you could have. And that, is that a philosophy thing? Like where does that fit into your kind of calculation?
If we needed it, we would have used it from wherever on the mountain, from base camp, 100%. And we did have it, and we turned it on for sure in the Khumbu icefall. But we were pre-acclimatized, so there were diminishing returns, sticking a mask on over your face and breathing oxygen at a really low flow.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean more up high. If we're just talking about safety, more oxygen absolutely makes us safer. There is no question.
But that, yes. But if you're banking on it and it goes wrong, then you're in a bind, like I was in 2004. And I changed oxygen in 2022 at the South Summit onto an empty bottle. Yeah. And I had the same feeling of, and it's not cool. And if that was it would have been, it would have been a big problem if there wasn't the option of tucking into more oxygen. So there's an argument around, you're just eroding the net if something goes wrong with your supply. And then there is an argument around footprint. And we were very keen to minimize our footprint on the mountain in terms of infrastructure. So I envisage Everest expeditions in the future with no base camp, for example. And that would be doing the Khumbu environment a massive a favor. Yeah. So, but just stashing loads and loads of oxygen at high altitude, increased risk to high altitude workers. It's more journeys through the icefall. Yes, we've got drones that are going that way that might be able to deliver them higher on the mountain. But yeah, I think probably the biggest step change to come with Everest is filtering your clients and making sure that they have solid resumes and they've actually done what it says on their resume.
I love that.
And it's a really difficult one to police in Nepal, a country that I love, but it's really difficult to police that.
Absolutely.
Because these are life-changing sums of money when Western climbers arrive at the door of pick your Nepali operator. And I'm not looking down on Nepali operators at all. I've used them.
Agreed.
I've used them before, and I was talking to one today that I'm keen to use in future. So
yeah, I think I'm separating more like budget operator versus non-budget instead of like location, because there are non-Nepali budget operators taking massive outsized risks that their clients don't understand, and doing negative things to the environment. In the same way, on the other side of the coin, there are non-budget Nepali operators that are offering a really high-end product with a high-end level of support, safety, and infrastructure.
So FMGA guides,
absolutely right,
and the works. But as you said at the beginning, you get what you pay for on the mountain. So
yes.
and I'm sure Will spoke about this much more eloquently than me. There is the place for base camp only services where you're on your own above it. And there's a place for the hand holding where you've got an IFMGA guide, and every Sherpa that goes above Camp 2's a multiple Everest summiter. So and everything in between.
Yep, absolutely right.
So we talked a bit about taking heat, right? And the UIAA sent out a statement very early on, poo-pooing the idea of Xenon in the high mountains, and based on no real analysis of the metadata. But all this talk about it being a WADA banned substance, and like putting to one side the fact that mountaineering isn't regulated, Diamox, acetazolamide, is a WADA banned substance, and everyone is taking that. Dexamethasone, of course, and I know your position on dexamethasone, Adrian, WADA banned substance. So the FSI, the Italian ski body, they ban oxygen, and I know WADA has looked at doing the same. I think it's banned in certain methodologies. So I think that argument was really clutching at straws for just throwing rocks at this idea.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point for sure. I think I've probably mentioned the WADA tie with Xenon, so I think it's worth bringing up. I mean, for me, I think we're all very clear that oxygen specific to altitude is the ultimate doping. And so
100%.
That's how the vast majority of us are climbing. So, I think when we're talking anti-doping, I think it's a worthwhile perspective to have what's on that list. I do think it has value because it then allows us to choose personally what type of ascent we're trying to have. And I, personally, from the pro athlete side, I think there is a great line to have that you're not using Diamox, you're not using dexamethasone, you're not using oxygen, you're not using Xenon, or if you are, you're acknowledging it. And so, I'm sure you've heard my little thing, everyone's got to have an asterisk after the name of every
we're going to have asterisks on the asterisks.
Yeah, and so, I do think it's still worth having these conversations, not so much to throw shade, but so that we can still have these different styles and kind of understand what they each are. But
so you're absolutely right, of course, but picking and choosing your WADA banned substance.
Right.
I'll take this one. I'm not going to take that one. It's a funny position to take.
And on the flip side, if WADA has it banned, then there's a performance enhancing component to it. And so there's, proof that there's effectiveness there.
Yeah, is there proof?
Right.
Well,
no.
In WADA's eyes.
So it's very easy to capture the headline, that the bold print at the top of the first paragraph in the news article. But when you dive into it, you might be surprised at what you learn. I'm not saying specifically you, Sam, and specifically on this topic, but more broadly, when it comes to mainstream sports, when it comes to mountaineering, but people's attention spans are very short and they're very, very quick to jump to a conclusion and strongly hold on to these perspectives that aren't actually theirs. That's what's being fed to them by whichever media source they draw their news from.
Yes.
Well, Garth, I can say you absolutely shifted my perspective on it all.
Amazing. That's good. I thought you were going to be a tough nut to crack, Sam.
So, Garth, you have been a lifelong climber. You've had these incredible experiences on Everest and elsewhere, including the Xenon experience, which was, pivotal in the industry. What's next for you?
Yeah, so it's a work in progress, really. There's off the back of the Mission Everest thing, there's been some interesting offers coming in, and I'm keen to take advantage of all of them. But I'm not a professional climber. I'm not professionally sponsored. So getting to the bottom of the mountain is a challenge for me in terms of raising the money necessary to get there, carving the time out of a full-time career flying airplanes, and I've got 2 small kids. But I'm totally addicted to 8,000 meter peaks, and I want to keep going back. So I've got big plans next year for Everest, which I'm going to sit on. I'm going to sit on at the moment.
That's okay.
And then there's there's still lots to be done on Everest, and it's all down to how big you are prepared to dream on that mountain. There's all sorts of amazing opportunities sitting there waiting, and I want to have a go at as many of those as possible. So I've got Everest expeditions planned out for the foreseeable future.
I love it. It's an amazing playground.
And wouldn't it be great if you could go off and do other mountains? And I totally get this argument of, if you're a real climber, you're going to be going to Pakistan and you're going to be climbing 7,000 meter peaks that no one's never even laid eyes on. And wouldn't that be great, putting up new routes? But I'm not a pro climber. And it's very difficult to raise corporate interest and going and climbing a mountain that no one's ever heard of and will never hear of again. So bizarrely, although Everest is the most expensive, it's probably the easiest to finance.
Absolutely. And luckily, it's got all the magic to it that it is easy, maybe the easiest to finance, even though it's the most expensive. But it gives back just as much as it costs, right? We both know that so clearly. Yeah. That's why we've dedicated so much of our lives to it.
100%. It breaks my heart to see this footage of 274 people, going up the triangular face and the queues along towards the South Summit and beyond. That is heartbreaking to see, but it's not as common as the media would have you believe. So 2019 was a particularly bad year when the summit window was squeezed. This year, everyone was really antsy because they'd spent so long in base camp that they're just super keen to get their clients up there and get it done. I think there's conversations to be had amongst the Nepali operators around coordinating summits and spreading things out a bit. I like Garrett's style of waiting to the very end of the season, which he does every year and has huge success.
Dave Hahn's old model, he was the OG of that he just always waited for the end.
It's warmer, the track is in, and every time I've been above 8,000 meters on that mountain, I've literally had it to myself, just my team and I, on the north side, and both times on the south side.
Yep. It's a great reminder that I think we do have to work on the kind of challenges of the mountain, but oftentimes how the media portrays them, they can seem really extreme, and they're actually these kind of edge cases. And I feel really strongly I'm not sure the mountain is too busy. I think what you mentioned before about kind of experience levels and things like that, if we had appropriately experienced climbers being led by appropriately experienced high altitude workers, mountain guides, and expedition leaders, I think a lot of that solves itself, actually, because of making decisions as mountain guides and everyone on the team having an experience that allows for the multitude of tools we can use up there to minimize standing in multi-hour long lines. So it'll be one of the many interesting things that kind of we see how they play out over the upcoming years.
The sad fact is you can get lucky on Everest and come out of nowhere with no experience. And we hear stories every year. I've never seen it myself, but we hear stories every year of people not being able to put their crampons on at crampon point in the icefall. And that may be true. There are hundreds of people trying to climb the mountain. And in any group of hundreds of people, there's going to be, the crazy fringe. So I heard there's a guy, Graham Hoyland, who climbed the mountain in the early 90s. So I view him as one of the originals, right? He did it properly old school style. And he likens it to walking across a freeway blindfolded. So you might get across, and be completely oblivious to the risk, but you might get taken out by a semi. And having experience and going with the right team, that's taking the blindfold off.
Yep.
And I think that analogy is quite a powerful one.
It's a great analogy. Absolutely. I appreciate that. The last thing I wanted to ask was just about, if I remember right, your climb, you actually were raising funds not only for your climb, of course, but also for an organization. And I just wanted to know, can you speak for a minute to that and what organization you chose and why?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian, for letting me air it. So we're all from the British Army and the Royal Marines, and we're raising money for service and veterans charities. In particular, charities that support bereaved military children, so the children of fallen warriors. And we raised somewhere north of $500,000 for veterans and service charities. And the big one is Scotty's Little Soldiers, which one of the guys on the team is a trustee for. So it was a cause that was really, really close to our heart. And when we're having that moment of truth just below the South Summit, having that greater why was a really powerful stimulus to keep going. So it meant a lot to us. Of course, it meant a lot to us. Between us, we had somewhere around 75 years of combined military service. So that why was sat above the whole thing. More important than the 7 days.
Well, I imagine as well as the money, like I imagine there's also inspiration that comes from an attempt like you're making, and how many were probably following that story in those groups and seeing what's possible.
Yeah, so in the US, and I'm in the US often, your veterans are revered, might be a bit of a strong word, but everyone's very thankful for people's service. And as a British soldier, I've had 2 people say to me, "Thank you for your service," in my career, right? And one of those was American. And the Brit that said it to me, I kind of had to double take. I was like, "What are you talking about?" So there is this, the media has this narrative in the UK with veterans as being mad, bad, and sad, damaged goods, PTSD. And we did want to highlight that the skills that we picked up in the military don't atrophy and die when we leave the military. And as veterans, we can still achieve these incredible things, seemingly impossible goals. And we wanted to just really shine a light on what veterans are capable of, and also hopefully inspire some veterans to get after it and keep doing what they were doing while they were serving.
Well, I appreciate so much. I mean, it's a year late in coming, but congratulations on your climb and your summit and all you achieved. And I really appreciate you coming on and being open to just answering questions and kind of sharing your experience. There's no doubt it's a fascinating moment within the arc of climbing on Mount Everest and in the big mountains. And I'm just fascinated to learn more and have some of my assumptions questioned. So I appreciate
and look, if it makes people safer above 8,000 meters, then it's got to be a good thing. But a lot of people, they'll hate to admit it, but they're anti-change, and I'm kind of the same in some cases. So my iPhone updated overnight, and it's massively frustrating. I've got to relearn a new iOS. Right, so I'm not naturally a change guy, but when it comes to making things safer and doing things differently, we just wanted to be at the bleeding edge of that and just see what's really possible.
Absolutely. It's pretty wild to go from being someone, I'm sure you've experienced this too, like I am now clearly the dinosaur in the room, right? In every room with all my mountain guides and all my peers and all my friends and all the people I climb with. And, I'm like, God, I swear I was the bleeding edge, And so that's why I think it's so important to be having these conversations in these forums, to be like, questioning, trying to be open, trying to learn, and this industry is going to keep moving forward, and all of us have a piece in making that the proudest path possible, while we might not agree with everything that happens along the way.
Love it. I've got 2 things to say to close, Adrian, Sam, if that's all right. And
absolutely.
I heard a quote a little while back: "Pioneers get arrows, settlers get the land." So we took a lot of heat being pioneers, but hopefully the settlers will come after us and take advantage of it. So, and the second one is, it's difficult to think, that's why people judge. So it's a really complex thing, xenon, and the physiological impacts of it. Acclimatization is a really difficult thing to get your head around in detail. I mean, fundamentally, people tend to understand that you need to do these rotations on the mountain, but it's difficult to think that's why people judge. And I think a lot of people jump straight to judge rather than digging behind the headlines.
Absolutely. Well, Garth, we really appreciate your time. We're looking forward to following along what's to come for Xenon in the future and what's to come for you. I think the next couple of years on Everest have something coming for him, right?
So I'm pretty psyched for it, yeah.
Well, we're here when you want to talk about it. So we'd love to have you back on to hear before or after.
All right, 100%. And definitely get Lucas and Michael on. And they can talk to the science, and but super grateful for those guys for facilitating it all and making it, having the vision as well to let us have a go at it.
Awesome. Thanks, Garth.
Thanks, Garth.
Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. You can follow along on Instagram, where we post our favorite clips from each episode, as well as more about the world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Catch you next time, and until then, we hope you enjoy some time outside.